You've probably heard this before, right? Every single country on earth is in debt. The US, China, Japan, Germany, all of them owe these staggering, mind-boggling sums of money. So that begs a pretty obvious question, doesn't it? If everybody owes money, who exactly is getting paid? In this explainer, we're going to unravel this massive global mystery. So, to get a sense of the scale we're talking about, just look at this number, $315 trillion. That's the grand total of global debt. It's a number so huge it's almost meaningless. To try and put it into perspective, it's more than 3 times the value of the entire global economy. Everything the world produces and does in a year, which, yeah, brings us right back to that huge nagging question. We're going to follow the money, peel back all the layers, and find out who or maybe what is on the other end of the world's biggest IOU. And I'll tell you right now, the answer is way stranger than you think. Now, here's the crazy part. We are all taught to think of debt as this bad thing, this huge weight holding us down. But for the global system, it's something else entirely. It's the very bones of our modern world. Think about it. Every major war, every financial crisis, every great leap of growth, it's all built on this invisible scaffolding of promises and IOUs. You know, this whole idea of a country being in debt, it's not new. Not at all. It basically started back in 1694. England was at war. They were running out of gold, so they made this clever deal with a bunch of wealthy merchants. Lend us your money to fight the war, they said. And we, the government, will guarantee to pay you interest forever, backed by the power of future taxes. And just like that, the government bond was born. This idea was so powerful, this ability to spend money you don't have yet, that everyone else started copying it. And that's how we got to today, where a country having a lot of debt isn't seen as a weakness. It's actually seen as a sign of credibility. Alright, so let's start digging. Let's unmask these mysterious creditors. Now, the usual suspect, the one everyone points their finger at, is other countries, right? We hear it all the time, how America is in debt to China and so on. But is that really the whole story? Okay, let's take the US as a perfect example, since its debt is such a massive piece of the puzzle. And right away, this chart shows something that blows most people's minds. The common wisdom is that foreign powers own America's debt. But look, a full two-thirds of it is actually held by Americans themselves. It's in their pension funds, held by domestic banks, and even owned by the government's own central bank, the Fed. Only about a third is held by the rest of the world. Okay, but what about China? We always hear about China owning America's debt, right? Well, when you actually break down the numbers, China holds just 2% of the total US debt. That's it. This whole popular narrative of China owning America is just not based in reality. So what does that mean? It means the biggest, most important takeaway so far is this. For the most part, a country's biggest creditor isn't some foreign rival, it's itself. And that's the first major twist in this whole mystery. Okay, so this brings us to a really weird kind of paradoxical idea. The creditor in the mirror, how in the world can a country owe money to itself? It sounds like nonsense, right? Well, let's break down how this circular system actually works. So how on earth does this work? Well, think of it like a big circle. The government needs to borrow money, so it issues bonds. And who buys those bonds? Well, a lot of them are bought by institutions right at home, like your own pension fund or your bank. Then, the government uses the taxes you pay to make interest payments on those bonds. And where does that interest money go? Right back into, you guessed it, the pension funds and savings accounts of its own citizens. It's a closed loop. The country is basically paying itself interest. Okay, now let's zoom out for a second, because this circular logic is not just happening inside countries, it's happening between them too. Japan buys US bonds, so it's lending to the US. The US funds the IMF, which lends to the FMF, which lends to Europe. Europe then lends to developing nations, who then turn around and buy US bonds for safety. It's this wild planetary game of hot potato, where the potato is made of promises and the only real rule is you have to keep passing it along. Okay, so we busted the myth that it's all about foreign countries, and we've seen this weird way that countries owe money to themselves. But that still doesn't explain where all this debt, all $300 trillion of it, even comes from. And to get that, we have to stop looking for a who and start looking at the what, the actual machine that creates debt. Right at the very heart of this machine are the central banks, like the Federal Reserve in the US. They have this incredible unique power. So the government needs money, it issues bonds. The central bank can then step in and buy those bonds from the market. Now, how does it pay for them? Well, this is the magic trick. By basically creating new money out of thin air, which it then pumps into the financial system. That's how a huge amount of new money actually comes into being. And this leads to a conclusion that honestly kind of breaks your brain the first time you hear it. In our modern financial system, money and debt are literally two sides of the same coin. Pretty much every single dollar, euro, or yen that exists was created at the exact moment that someone or some government took on an equal amount of debt. There's really no such thing as debt free money. So, okay, if money is actually just debt and all this debt is just moving around in a big circle, what's stopping the whole thing from just collapsing? The answer is the most powerful and also the most fragile force in all of finance. The ultimate creditor isn't a person or a bank or a country. It's just an idea, confidence. To really get this, you have to throw out everything you know about personal debt, like a mortgage or a credit card bill. Government debt plays by a totally different set of rules. For you, the goal is to one day pay back the original amount you borrowed, the principal. For a government, the goal is just to roll over the principal, to just keep issuing new debt to pay off the old debt as it comes due. For you, failing to pay is called default. For them, constantly refinancing is called success. And that brings us to maybe the single most shocking, counterintuitive truth of this whole thing. The plan was never to pay it back. Not now, not ever. And that isn't some dark conspiracy theory. It's just the textbook reality of modern economics. The goal isn't to get rid of the debt. The goal is to manage it, to keep it serviceable, and to make sure people still want to own it. And that shark analogy, it's perfect. The global financial system has to keep moving forward, constantly rolling over old debt into new debt just to stay alive. As long as everyone believes that governments can make their interest payments, they'll keep lending them money. The whole system runs on perpetual belief, not on the promise that it'll all be paid back one day. But that, of course, raises the biggest, scariest question of them all. This entire multi-trillion dollar global architecture is built on nothing more solid than collective belief. So what happens when that belief, that confidence starts to crack?